The cold steel clamped onto his wrist, the sound sharp and final in the airport terminal. A phone camera flashed, burning the image into his memory. Just an hour earlier, he was Samuel Pierce, the Deputy Director of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Now, in the main concourse of John Glenn Columbus International Airport, he was just a problem two cops had decided to create. It had all started with a look. After a long flight from Dallas, all Pierce wanted was his waiting car in the quiet of his hotel room. His charcoal suit, tailored to perfection, made no sound as he crossed the polished floor of Concourse B. He carried a single briefcase, its contents classified at a level most Americans didn't know existed. As he passed Gate B27, his eyes caught two airport policemen loitering by a kiosk. The younger one, Officer Dunn, nudged his partner. "Get a load of the suit," he murmured with a smirk. The older officer, Klein, let his eyes crawl over Pierce, from his expensive shoes to his calm, steady face. Another one, Klein thought with a sneer. Thinks his money makes him king. Too clean, too confident. Let's see what he's really hiding. Pierce registered every signal. The nudge, the shared look, the predatory shift in their posture. 3 decades of federal service had taught him to smell trouble from a mile off. He kept his pace even. Breathe, he told himself. They're baiting you. Don't take it. He heard their heavy shoes approaching. "Sir, can we have a word?" Klein's voice was already laced with accusation. Pierce stopped and turned, his movements deliberate. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. Klein looked him up and down again, hooking his thumb in his belt, inches from his baton. "You fit the description of a person of interest," he said slowly. "What description would that be?" Pierce asked, his expression unreadable. Klein's lips twisted into a condescending smirk. Black man, mid-50s, expensive suit, carrying a locked briefcase. He let the words hang in the air, his gaze heavy with insinuation. Could be carrying something sensitive. We just need to be sure. The way he said sensitive sounded exactly like stolen. There it is, Pierce thought, a familiar anger rising in his chest. The first mistake. "You mean," Pierce countered coolly, "I fit the description of a government employee on his way home from a business trip?" "Sir," Klein snarled, stepping into Pierce's personal space, "we're going to need to see what's in that briefcase." "I don't think you will," Pierce said, his grip tightening on the handle. "My name is Samuel Pierce. I'm the Deputy Director of the DEA." For a second, there was silence. Then Klein let out a short, ugly laugh. He shot a look at his partner. "The DEA, huh? You got anything to prove a story like that?" Without a word, Pierce reached into his suit jacket and produced his credentials. The gold badge and federal ID were unmistakable. He held them out for inspection. Klein just stared at the badge as if it were a cheap toy. "Anybody can get one of those made," he scoffed. "Doesn't mean a thing to me." Onlookers were starting to notice. A few travelers stopped, and a phone was already out, recording the encounter. "I am identifying myself as a federal officer," Pierce stated, his voice dangerously calm. "That is the protocol." "We make the protocol here," Dunn snapped, stepping forward, "and we're taking you in for questioning." Klein reached for the briefcase. Pierce took a sharp step back. "Do not touch that case. Hands where I can see them." Klein's roar was a public humiliation, designed to provoke a reaction. They moved in, backing him against the kiosk. Pierce didn't resist, but stood his ground. "You are making a serious mistake," he said, his voice cutting. Klein grabbed Pierce's arm and violently twisted it behind his back, while Dunn fumbled with his handcuffs. The briefcase dropped to the floor with a solid thud. A wave of gasps went through the now-growing crowd as dozens of phones were raised to record the arrest. The steel cuffs closed on his wrists. Klein leaned in, his breath sour with stale coffee. "You have the right to remain silent," he muttered, the words empty and routine. Pierce's voice was steady and clear, carrying over the whispers of the crowd. "Do you understand what you're doing? You are currently committing a federal crime by unlawfully detaining a senior official of the United States government." Officer Dunn let out a dismissive snort. "We're just keeping the airport secure, sir. You're the one making this difficult." Difficult? Pierce thought, a cold fury coiling in his gut. You have no idea what difficult looks like. He ignored the perimeter of cell phones recording every humiliating second, his eyes locked on the two officers. I have presented valid federal credentials, he said, his voice low and threatening. I have told you exactly who I am. If you proceed without verifying that information, you are stepping into a fire you cannot control. You're done talking, Dunn said, jerking his head toward a bench. They pushed Pierce over and forced him down hard. His briefcase lay on the polished floor between them, a testament to their arrogance. A woman in the crowd finally shouted, her voice shaking with anger. What did he do? Why are you arresting him? Dunn whirled around. Mind your own business. This is a secure area. His outburst only drew a larger circle of onlookers, their whispers growing into an angry buzz. Klein shot his partner a venomous look, his own confidence beginning to fray. Get his ID, he hissed. Dunn fumbled to pick up the credentials from the floor. He stared at the heavy, gold-plated badge in his palm. His jaw went slack as he turned it over. The weight of it, the flawlessly engraved seal of the Department of Justice, suddenly felt very real. Klein, Dunn whispered, the blood draining from his face. What is it? Klein snapped, trying to maintain his crumbling authority. I think this is real. Klein snatched the credentials from his partner. He stared at the official photograph, then at the intricate holographic overlay. His eyes darted from the ID to Pierce's stony face and back again. For the first time, a flicker of raw, undeniable fear appeared in his eyes. This is a fake, he blurted, but the bark was gone from his voice, replaced by a desperate whine. Where did you get it? That badge was issued to me by the Department of Justice, Pierce said, his gaze locking with Klein's. It was issued to me after a 30-year career in law enforcement, a career that built the very standards you are disgracing right now. Just then, Klein's radio crackled to life, a dispatcher's voice cutting through the terminal's tense silence. All units in Concourse B, be advised. FBI is en route to your location regarding a potential unlawful detention of a federal officer. Stand by. Klein froze. He stared at Dunn, whose face had turned a sickly shade of pale. There was no confusing code, no room for interpretation. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Unlawful detention. Federal officer. Pierce's warning echoed in their minds with terrifying clarity. He simply sat on the bench, his expression unreadable, a silent judge watching their world collapse. The cuffs came off. Dunn fumbled with the keys, dropping them with a metallic clatter before snatching them up, his hands shaking uncontrollably. This was just a misunderstanding, sir, he stammered. Pierce slowly rubbed the raw red marks on his wrists. He met Dunn's terrified gaze with cold fire in his own. Don't say sir now and expect it to fix what you've done. Klein, moving like a man in a trance, bent down to retrieve the briefcase. He held it out, his hand trembling. Here, sir. Pierce didn't move. He didn't even glance at the case. His eyes remained fixed on Klein's face, a silent, powerful rebuke. You do not have the clearance to handle classified government property. Klein's hand froze. The entire concourse seemed to hold its breath. Before another word could be spoken, a new voice cut through the air. Excuse me, officers. An older man with a ramrod-straight posture stepped forward. I know who this man is. That's Samuel Pierce, the deputy director of the DEA. I saw him on Meet the Press just last week, testifying before the House Oversight Committee. As the officers stared, dumbfounded, an airport supervisor pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of pure horror. Sir, on behalf of the airport, I am so sorry, she said to Pierce before turning on Klein and Dunn, her voice a low, furious snarl. Are you two out of your minds? You arrested a DEA deputy director on camera without cause? He wouldn't comply, Klein began, his voice a desperate croak. No, Pierce's voice boomed, silencing him instantly. I complied completely. I stated my name and position. I provided federal credentials. You refused to perform the simple act of verification. Before the stunned supervisor could speak, two men in dark suits sliced through the crowd. Deputy Director Pierce, the lead agent called out. They were from the FBI's Cincinnati field office. He reached Pierce, his jaw set like stone. Agent Holloway. Sir, are you injured? I'm fine, Pierce said, his tone flat and cold. Holloway's eyes narrowed as he turned to Klein and Dunn. "Which one of you put him in cuffs?" Klein stammered, unable to form a word. Holloway cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Stand down, both of you." Dunn looked like he was about to be physically ill. Klein stared at his own shoes, the picture of a broken man. The FBI team was brutally efficient. One agent began taking statements, while another confirmed Pierce's identity with a portable biometric scanner. "Pull all security footage from this concourse," Holloway commanded, "and I want the body cam data from both of these officers. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be expecting it." "This is insane," Klein muttered under his breath. The older man who had recognized Pierce stepped forward. "No," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "What's insane is that you thought you could get away with treating a man like this because he's black, and that nobody would stand up for him." A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Pierce finally retrieved his briefcase, wiping a smudge of dust from its leather surface. "I'd like to leave now," he said. "Of course, sir," Holloway replied. "We'll escort you." He walked away without a single backward glance at the two officers whose careers he had just ended. Inside the waiting black sedan, Agent Holloway's controlled fury was visible on her face. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, her voice tight. "I'm tired, Holloway," Pierce replied wearily. He flexed his hands, and the deep red marks from the cuffs stood out against his skin. Holloway saw them, and her jaw tightened. "The airport is crawling with reporters," she said grimly. "There are at least 5 videos of the arrest going viral as we speak." Pierce stared out the armored window at the blur of runway lights. "Let them." "The local police department is in full panic mode," she continued. "They've already suspended both officers." Pierce gave a slight, humorless shake of his head. "That's not my concern." After a moment of silence, Holloway spoke again, her voice softer. "Sir, this is the 3rd time in 4 months. The elevator incident at Langley, the SCI clearance mix-up. Now this." Pierce turned to her, his eyes like chips of ice. "I keep receipts, Agent. The difference is, this one comes with video evidence." Back at the airport, the consequences unraveled with blinding speed. In a sterile conference room, Klein and Dunn sat in silence until the door opened. A man from the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General entered. He was tall, severe, and looked as though he had never smiled in his life. He dropped 2 thick folders on the table. "Officer Klein, Officer Dunn, as of this moment, you are a national embarrassment," the investigator said, his voice gravel and ice. "You have been suspended, but that is the least of your problems. You are facing federal charges for the unlawful detention of a federal officer and deprivation of rights under color of law. Those charges carry a sentence of up to 10 years in prison." Dunn's head fell into his hands. Klein just stared, his face ashen. The investigator leaned forward, his eyes boring into them. "However, the Attorney General has authorized me to offer you a one-time deal. You will sign these resignation papers, effective immediately. You will surrender your badges, your weapons, and any and all law enforcement credentials. In return, the DOJ will not pursue criminal prosecution. You will, however, be permanently blacklisted from ever holding a position of public trust in this country again. You have 5 minutes to decide." Klein scoffed, a pathetic flicker of his earlier arrogance. "You can't just—" "I can," the investigator cut him off, his voice lethal. "And I will. Sign the papers, or I walk out that door and file the charges myself." He pushed the documents and 2 pens across the table. Defeated, Dunn shakily signed his name. Klein stared at the paper for a long moment, his jaw working silently. Finally, with a trembling hand, he signed away his career. "Now the badges," the investigator commanded. "The real question this nation must ask itself is what happens to the men who don't have a badge to show when they are wrongly accused." He stepped back from the podium, his message delivered. The point was made. Justice, for once, had been swift and absolute.